Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of The Tale Collector, celebrating stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I'm your host, Erica Adams. Many years passed between when I first heard of this film and when I actually got to see it. Those who grew up in the 90s may remember Cartoon Network's Cartoon Theater block, when every Saturday night and or Sunday morning it would air an animated feature film, like Balto, the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie, The Land Before Time, and the like. Classic. Then, in late 1998, a Cartoon Theater promo aired for this movie. I'm not gonna lie, it was, at the time, the strangest looking movie I had ever been exposed to in my young life. Unfortunately, I missed it. And, of course, I never saw it on that or any other station again. But thank heaven for both time and the internet. I was at last able to watch it in full, not to mention make sense of that long ago promo, and later to finally buy the official DVD. For a while, I was beginning to think that it would never reach that point due to its history and consequent obscurity. More on that later. But hey, better late than never, right? Please allow me to present Twice Upon a Time, released August 5th, 1983, and rated PG for some crude language and frightening imagery. In between two polar opposite dream worlds rests the earthly land known as Din, inhabited by people called rushers, so named because they are always literally rushing at whatever they're doing. The only time they don't rush is when they sleep, which is where the dreams, and their respective dream makers, come in. On one side is Frivolity, where sweet and happy dreams are made to be delivered to the rushers of Din by the gruff and pirate-like Greensleeves and his helpers, the Figmen of Imagination. Get it? At the other end of the spectrum is the Mercworks, home of the dark and dingy factory in which the sinister synonymous Botch creates missile-like nightmare bombs to be dropped upon the rushers by his giant vultures. It comes to pass that Botch, tired of competing against Frivolity, seeks the power of the cosmic clock, which controls the universal flow of time, as part of his dastardly plot to bring eternal nightmares to the rushers of Din. The only ones standing in his way are two foolish but lovable misfits of Frivolity. Ralph, the all-purpose animal, so called because of his somewhat faulty shape-shifting ability, and Mumford, his squeaky, honking, Chaplin-esque companion. The two must stop Botch and save the rushers of Din while proving to the many skeptics they meet along the way that they are in fact capable of doing something right. As I touched on before, this is a film with a very unusual history, and not just due to the Lad Company, the studio that distributed it, going bankrupt after both this film and The Right Stuff failed at the box office. There were actually two versions of Twice Upon a Time made, though identical to each other, with no added or omitted segments to visually set one apart from the other. Each featured various scenes with lines that differed from those of the other. One of these was far more adult than the other, thanks in large parts to voice actor Marshall Efron, who supplied his character, Botch, with some lines that were pretty raunchy. On both opening night and years later on HBO, the adult version, favored over the more family-friendly cut by both Efron and producer Bill Courtier, was shown. This, however, enraged director John Cordy, who disapproved of the adult version and even threatened HBO with legal action if they ever aired it again. Just to give an example, compare the scene where Botch is trying to summon his henchman and head screamwriter, again, get it, Scuzz Bopper, and that's one of the few differing scenes without curse words. Based on the research I had done on Twice Upon a Time, another reason behind its erratic release history, especially by the late 90s and early 2000s, is its datedness. Take the soundtrack, for instance. The songs featured in the film are performed by artists whose names very few of the younger generation are likely to recognize, except for maybe Bruce Hornsby. The ones whose names I hadn't heard of prior to seeing this film include Maureen McDonald, sister of Steely Dan and Doobie Brothers member Michael McDonald, and early 20th century bandleader and TV host Lawrence Welk. A little piece of trivia. In spite of this datedness, the movie did help to launch the careers of many now famous cinematic artists, such as sequence director Henry Selick, who went on to direct stop-motion films like The Nightmare Before Christmas, James and the Giant Peach, and Coraline, visual effects producer David Fincher, who went on to direct thrillers like Seven, Fight Club, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, among others, and character designer Harley Jessup, who went on to be production designer for Pixar films like Ratatouille and Monsters, Inc. Animation-wise, this is by far one of the most innovative films I've ever seen, utilizing an old stop-motion technique called lumage. It was first developed for some animated sketches of Sesame Street back in the 70s, and involves placing and moving bits of colored paper, plastic, and other materials over a light table. The film is presented in both lumage and live action. The characters and the dream worlds are animated in the former, vibrant, colorful, and outlandish, much like dreams tend to be, while the rushers and Din are live people in a black and white, real world, sometimes moving, other times in photographic still shots. The cutout appearance and jerky movements of lumage, I believe, are comparable to the signature design of the TV series South Park, while some of the more photorealistic scenery is reminiscent of the animated segments of the Monty Python franchise. Moreover, the juxtaposition of cartoon animation to the live-action scenes may bring to mind that of the 1968 Beatles film Yellow Submarine. For the best example of this, check out the Eleanor Rigby segment, and you'll see what I mean. The two main protagonists are the type that you just want to go up and give a great big hug to, especially whenever they are being verbally abused by others, which occurs quite often by villain and good guy alike. The flat, drawling voice provided by Lorenzo Music, yes, Lorenzo Garfield Music, gives Ralph the quality of a stereotypical middle-aged drip, constantly rambling, rarely eloquent, and ever clumsy, but still as pleasant and adorably innocent as his teddy bear face. His mute and mimish best friend Mumford, though flaky, easily distracted, and curious to a fault, is also wonderfully expressive, energetic, and always there for his pal. Besides the appearance, it is the zany cast of characters that really make this film. Among others, there is the snarky, no-nonsense Brooklyn-accented fairy godmother, Flora Fauna, a compassionate, albeit showy, anthropomorphic flower who longs to be a famous actress, Rod Rescueman, a jock-like superhero in training whose stupidity is as boundless as his physical strength, the aforementioned Scuzz Bopper, a Groverish-voiced jester-like character who'd rather be a respectable author than a screenwriter the rest of his life, and easily one of the most creative characters in any film, Ybor, a gorilla-haired TV-like robot that communicates through actual classic TV and film clips, from Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and The Muppet Show, fitting, by the way, considering that George Lucas executive produced this movie, to Happy Days, Looney Tunes, and Abbott and Costello. Needless to say, the disputes surrounding this film, as well as certain presentation choices, all but guaranteed that it would seldom see the light of day for the next 30 years, even in the era of internet streaming. That being said, though, this is the kind of movie I could certainly see being shown in a college film course. With its unique animation style, unusual conception, and woefully underrated status, Twice Upon a Time is one of those experiences I think anyone, but especially those with a passion for film, would be much the poorer for missing out on. A delightfully offbeat comedy with underdogs to root for, and a story that only a dream could yield. Gather round next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you.